On the morning of January 1st, 1945, the Allied air forces in Belgium and the Netherlands were vulnerable. Most of their pilots were asleep, recovering from massive New Year's Eve celebrations. Their planes were lined up like sitting ducks on the tarmac. It was the perfect opportunity for a knockout blow. At exactly 8 a.m., the horizon darkened as 900 German fighters, the last remnants of the once mighty Luftwaffe, screamed across the border at treetop level. This was Operation Bodenplatte. It was supposed to be the Pearl Harbor of the Western Front. It was a plan designed to reset the war and give Hitler one last chance at victory. But 180 minutes later, the Luftwaffe wasn't celebrating a victory. It was committing a spectacular act of self-cannibalism. In 3 hours, the German Air Force would lose more irreplaceable veterans than in any other single mission of the war. Not because the Allies were better, but because the German command was so obsessed with secrecy that they forgot to tell their own side they were coming. This is the story of the day the Luftwaffe committed suicide. By early 1945, Germany was a cornered animal. Hitler's last-ditch offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, was gasping for air. The German ground forces were being pulverized by Allied aircraft that dominated the skies like gods. For the Germans, every time a fighter took off, it was outnumbered 10-1. Aviation fuel was gone. Pilots were being sent into combat with less than 100 hours of flight time, barely enough to learn how to land, let alone survive a dogfight against an American P-51 Mustang. General Dietrich Peltz knew the only way to win was to cheat. He realized that if you can't beat the enemy in the sky, you have to murder them in their beds. He spent months secretly gathering 900 fighters, Me-10-9s, FW-19s, and even the revolutionary Me-262's jets. The logic was sound. One massive, synchronized strike to destroy every Allied plane on the ground. If they could wipe out 500 planes in one morning, they could seize the initiative. But Peltz made one fatal error. He trusted his own system too much. The Germans were so terrified of Allied intelligence that they implemented total secrecy. Pilots weren't told their targets until the night before. No radio transmissions were allowed. But the most insane part of the plan? They never told the flak gunners. The German anti-aircraft batteries, thousands of 88mm and 20mm guns, defending the V-1 rocket sites and German-held territory, had no idea Operation Bodenplatte was happening. Imagine you are a 17-year-old German flak gunner on New Year's morning. You've spent months being strafed by Allied planes. Suddenly, 900 fighters appear out of the mist, flying lower than the trees, straight at your position. They have no lights. They are flying in a way only an attacker would fly. You don't wait for a signal. You pull the trigger. As the 900 German planes crossed their own lines, the sky erupted. Their own side opened fire with everything they had. Pilots who had survived the frozen skies of Russia and the meat grinder of the Battle of Britain were shredded by their own brothers in arms. Dozens of German planes crashed into the Belgian snow before they ever saw a single Allied soldier. The perfect secret had become a firing squad. For the pilots who survived their own flak, the mission only got worse. At airfields like Eindhoven, the surprise was genuine. British pilots, still in their pajamas or hungover from the night's festivities, watched in horror as FW-190s red the tarmac, turning rows of Typhoons and Spitfires into burning skeletons. At first, it looked like a German masterpiece. They destroyed nearly 500 Allied aircraft. But here is where the outlier mathematics of 1945 comes into play. The Allies were losing things. The Germans were losing people. On that New Year's morning, 237 German pilots were killed or captured. In the brutal world of attrition, 237 sounds like a small number. But these weren't just pilots. They were the last of the masters. Among the dead were 19 unit commanders, the veteran leaders who held the entire Luftwaffe together. The Allies lost 465 planes, but only about 70 pilots. Most of the American and British pilots were safe in their barracks when their planes blew up. By February, American factories had replaced every single plane lost in Operation Bodenplatte. They had so many planes they didn't know where to park them. But Germany? Germany couldn't replace a single one of those 237 veterans. Major Gerhard Barkhorn, the second highest scoring ace in history, with 301 victories, watched the carnage unfold. He survived the mission, but he saw his unit and his country's future disintegrate in the sky. He later remarked that January 1st, 1945, was the day he truly knew the war was lost. It wasn't just the losses. It was the realization that the German command structure had become so dysfunctional, so paralyzed by fear and secrecy, that it had turned its guns on itself. Operation Bodenplatte was a tactical success. They hit the targets. They achieved surprise. They burned the airfields. But it was a strategic suicide. After those 180 minutes, the Luftwaffe ceased to exist as a functional fighting force. They had used their last drop of fuel and their last experienced pilots on a mission that achieved nothing more than a 2-week delay for the Allies. Bodenplatte teaches us the most dangerous lesson in military history. Secrecy is a double-edged sword. When you hide the truth from your enemies, you risk hiding it from your friends. The Germans looked at the map and saw aircraft. They didn't see industry. They didn't understand that you can't win a war of attrition against a country that builds 8,000 planes a month by shooting down 500 of them. The Luftwaffe, which had once terrorized the world from the Spanish Civil War to the gates of Moscow, died in a confused, screaming mess of friendly fire on a cold New Year's morning. It wasn't a heroic last stand. It was a bureaucratic disaster. So here's the question for you. If the German flak gunners had been warned, if those 237 pilots had survived the journey to the airfields, could Operation Bodenplatte have actually grounded the Allied Air Force for good? Or was the industrial might of the US so massive that no surprise attack could ever have changed the outcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see more stories about the hidden disasters that decided the fate of World War II, hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and remember, in war, the loudest silence is the one that happens right before a mistake.